Hello, HLTV.org forum trolls. I know that you all have a fantastic place on this earth and now in Twitch chat with us as we do this whole thing live. But we got some guests with us this evening who are a little bit out of the norm. I'm hosting this thing. I'll probably do a lot of talking too, so get used to that. We got Striker, as expected, but we have Janko, the coach of FaZe, with us, and we have Sergey, lmbt, former coach of Mouse. It's very touchy subject. That kind of just all happened, and we might get stuck to that one. But good evening, gentlemen. How's everybody?
Yo, very good.
Doing great, Chad. I was just looking for a conversation with yourself after having a full day of practice, so I'm feeling lovely.
This is a great way for you to decompress, you know, to really really let some anger and steam out, because some of these topics we might hit you might enjoy. But we do have the breaking
that's the
news.
masturbator topic.
Yes, that's one of my favorites.
That's definitely my thing. Yeah.
That's where Striker really does his best work. But we do have the breaking news to kick things off. Do we have our sound cue, Lucas?
Drop it.
I thought we discussed this, Lucas. I thought we were going with more of a somber tune this evening because we do actually have Sergey here. But the breaking news for everybody playing at home, I know a lot of moving parts. The breaking news is mousesports. Here we go. Are down to 3. So if you missed it, Stiko, Chris J, and lmbt himself have been it appears to be benched. Is that the right terminology to be using here?
I think you should close it now because we can't hear anything right now.
Yeah, it's like a vacuum cleaner in the background. But we made it. Okay, so Sergey, I'm sure there's only certain things that you can say on this whole topic. So I'll let you have the floor first to kind of state whatever you need to state about this before we get stuck into this. But this is obviously the breaking news of the day.
Yeah, I mean, look, like it's nothing special. We were together for quite a while, over a year, I'd say, and unfortunately, we had some issues with this Yannick and bringing Stiko back, right, at some point of our journey. Then it ended up how everyone saw, right? But that's like one of the reasons, I would say. But the main reason is basically that we are tired from each other, I guess. And everyone, with the time coming up, everyone was just not satisfied how we work and how we approaching the work and stuff like that. So I think that some people might be happy about it, some not, but that's how sometimes things happen. So it's nothing special for me, to be honest.
Okay, so for you, it's like kind of more like a mutual situation to be going on, just the direction of the team and where all things ended up. I remember speaking to you it was a Star Ladder before the player break last year, and you and I speak a lot at these events, and you were talking about how like the map pool, like you didn't have time to practice, you're going to a lot of events, all that kind of stuff, and then the whole snack situation went down. I don't know how much you want to comment on this part of it, but that whole thing, did you like was that a mess just waiting to happen? Like the whole getting snacks to the roster, do you think that you guys should have just stayed when you had Stiko in the team in the first place?
I mean, we never know how situation would go if we would kept Stiko, right? But I don't think the main reason is we didn't have time to practice and stuff. It's not because of tournaments for me. I think the reason is just that the lineup, basically, time of this lineup just come to an end. In any sports or esports or whatever, some players getting changed, right? Sooner or later. Same as great coaches or bad coaches or good and bad players. It doesn't matter how good or bad are you. It's just like time-wise, some teams could stick together for 4 years, like VP, right? Well, for us it was 1.5 years. So, okay, it just time has come for me.
That's a pretty good run. I don't know, Striker. I think you had a question, didn't you, that you wanted to lay on this topic at least?
Well, I think it's just Lucas actually brought it up in the chat when we were talking about the topic of the show, and he kind of mentioned that every time something went wrong with mousesports, like when you guys went out pretty early, we saw some talk about like this team not really being, I don't want to say friendly, I guess, but I'm sure you were, but I guess there wasn't that camaraderie as there is in other teams. So is that something that you would agree with? Do you think there was just not the chemistry?
Yeah, I would, to be honest. I mean, we was not even denying that we don't need to be like best friends, that we are more of co-workers, right? Co-workers.
Yeah.
And that we have goals, we have goals set, and we will just work for it. And that was a good part, to be honest, because we are like from 6 different countries, obviously, right? And with 6 different mentalities. And all of us agreed at some point that we shouldn't like overreact and be like best friends to reach some results. And that was helping us at some point, because we never had any fights inside the team and stuff like that, like at all. Almost never during this 1.5 years we had some serious like fights inside the team. We were just fixing things like, yeah, okay, that didn't work, we'll work it out next time, and that's it. We was looking on everything like on a job, basically,
So it was more of a professional thing rather than like you guys actually not liking each other or anything like that, just to make things clear.
Yeah, obviously.
Oh, I think that like would have worked out pretty well, all things considered. And I think the fact you're saying that all rosters come to an end, I think that also has a pretty good point. With what's been left of that roster right now, just for those playing at home, it is Rops, Sunny, and Oscar. That's the core trio left in that team. Maybe we'll just start the discussion from this point going forward. We can kick it off with Janko, I guess. That core being left, I think they've obviously lost an in-game leader. They need to find somebody to fill that role, but who do you think, Janko, if you had to start hazarding guesses and throwing bits and pieces around, where do you think they might be looking for replacements?
I think the big name is Kerrigan, because he's like been benched by FaZe, and everyone's looking for an in-game leader, especially mousesports. I mean, Chris J wasn't natural in-game leader. He had to pick up that role when Nico left the team. So it's almost 2 years now that he's been doing it, but I think that's something that they're definitely going to be looking for, at least one of the players to be the in-game leader. And then the second one, I think it depends, because for that team, I think they're aware it's not just about getting like a super skilled player, and just like who's going to frag out of his mind. I think they realize that they need to maybe think it through a bit more, so that they have this time around they can build some of that chemistry that you guys have mentioned. Because to me, I'm not gonna lie, I mean, I even said this on stream when we were working, Chad, and stuff, like I couldn't imagine being on that team, or like potentially being a coach of that team, because there's no personality on that team. Everyone just looks so dejected. I don't know if I've ever seen one of mousesports players smile when they've been playing. Like maybe Chris J, after he gets a ace against Liquid, like, or something like that, that probably puts a smile on everyone's face. But they're just, I don't know. That's when we were talking about mousesports. You remember, like early last year, could mousesports maybe become the best team in the world? After the first couple of tournaments in the year, and then it was like, well, I don't really see them ever being a #1 team. I just doesn't seem that they have the attitude for it. They don't have the heart for it. So hopefully, like now, they can select players and forge their roster in a way where they do have some of that, and maybe those new additions are going to light the fire in some of these players who have been around for a while, especially the likes of Oscar, who they are all great players, like no doubt about that, very skilled players. But it's not just about skill for you to be, to become the best in the world. At least it's how I see it.
Yeah, that was a problem that we highlighted, and one that like we really struggled to see any, I guess, somebody lift the morale in that team. I think like with players who have been doing pretty good recently, I don't know the contract situation with everybody. I think that's going to be more of a problem. However much Kerrigan's going to cost to get off of FaZe to go to mousesports, that's a big issue, right? That's not a cheap buyout. I don't know if mousesports has the money to be rolling around with a player like that, but if they want to improve the team, that seems like the most obvious one right now. Maybe the Danish scene is in the same thought process. So if a North comes knocking or someone like that, might be a bit difficult. But like I think like Valder would be a pretty sound addition to this team as well. I think if the people in chat were bringing that up as a player, and I just think the way that he is able to be such a fantastic role player, right? He's can do anything. Watching him recently, he's just been absolutely lighting it up. So you add him into that mix of firepower, you've got some pretty solid players in there already. That's getting to be a scary thought. But I was starting to lean down the path, and it's probably a good thing we have the both of you here, coaches who have coached teams who none of you are speaking your native languages in with 6 different members in the squad. Do you guys feel that is a huge detriment to being the best Counter-Strike team in the world? We're going off on a bit of a tangent here. We can stay closer to these mouse sports movements if you want, but this question is one that has been bugging me recently. With how good Astralis look, it seems to me that like even for like a phase or MIBR when you were there, Janko, it's hard to bridge that gap of communication purely because there is going to be always that little bit of delay with what's being spoken. Do you guys think that this is a massive issue?
Yeah, I think it depends. For example, like now in phase, except for Dren who's struggling a little bit because it's his first time and everything, the rest of the guys are so used to communicating in English that it doesn't seem like that they have any major issues in that sense. If anything, I think they need more names for positions because everything's a corner or a wall or whatever. But when it comes to like giving out info, I think it's fine. I don't know if it maybe hinders them a little bit when people need to organize things mid-round, and say which nades they have or who's gonna throw what. Sometimes that takes a bit longer than it should. So I'm not sure if that's necessarily because of a language barrier or it's just, that's just a lot to think about at the same time while you're playing, so it could be either of those things. I do know that in MIBR the problem wasn't the basic communication or anything like that. It was just that some of the players felt like they could do so much more. They could give like better information. They could like move their teammates a bit better, telling them where to stand or what to expect. But it was too much to do that and also to focus on your own game. So that's where the communication issues really happen on a second level. But to answer your actual question, do I think a team like that can be the best in the world? Yes, I think so, because those situations do not happen like all the time or super often, and even when they do, they're not always going to cost you a round, right? If you stay composed, it doesn't have to be detrimental to the round and what you're doing. So sure, it's going to be an obstacle here and there, but that's the price you pay for you to have talent that otherwise you would never be able to put into the same lineup.
Sure. Do you think the same, Sergey, or do you think
Yeah, I kind of agree. Like, I don't think we had communication issues regarding infos or whatever. People get used to it, and we was communicating in English pretty long time, I would say. But only difference between these teams, between like us, FaZe, Astralis, for example, whatever, is mentality, basically. Because, for example, Astralis have kind of same aged players, plus minus, except Magisk, right? And they're from same country, so they have more things to talk about outside of game, and stuff like that. So it's only like team mentality is different for me, and that's what we lack, and that's what I guess guys who stayed want to build. They want to build like a team, yeah.
Sure.
So, yeah, I don't think that English language is a barrier here at all.
Okay. If you guys had the choice, now this seems like a ridiculous one. I can't speak a different language, so it's a bit difficult for me to say. But if you guys had the choice, would you prefer to coach a team speaking your native language or coach a team like of just multi-talented like you've got right now? I guess it's kind of different considering regions, because you've probably only got the Valiance team if that was an option. But for Sergey, there'd be a lot of options for you to coach within your own region with Russian and Ukrainian, right?
Well, if you want to compete on top level, there is not too much teams which you can
Sure.
coach in CS, right? So first of all, you have ambitions, and for me, it doesn't matter which language to talk, to be honest.
Yeah, for me, I mean, obviously in theory, it would always be better to just coach a team in your own language, or for me, it would be also fine to coach a team whose language, like English, is their native language, right? But I mean, not an ideal scenario, I guess. If Alliance can pay me enough, I would maybe do it. I don't know. Even they are speaking English now, so
Yeah, that's true.
That's true.
A couple of big changes.
I'm gonna bring Nico there. I'm gonna be a player myself, not a coach. Just be the in-game leader. Come back in 2020, Chad.
Now we're talking.
And just you can be my coach.
Oh, okay. I learned Serbian as quickly as I possibly can. But what we'll do is we'll move on from this mouse sports topic, and we're going to move towards the whole North thing, keep it on the coaching side of things. And we're going to get Striker back involved here, because I've been having some very hard, direct questions here. But Striker, you want to give everybody the rundown on what happened with this whole AVE situation?
Well, what has been said officially is that Abe basically stepped down himself because of like family things, that he has a third child coming, or something along those lines, right? And he basically decided that he wants to spend more time with family. How much this was actually The organization's decision, we're not entirely sure. I'm guessing it was just a combination of things, as it usually is. But from North's perspective, I mean, the obvious reason for this move is just because they screwed up at the minor, basically similarly as North as mousesports. I'm sorry, except they actually had another chance and they blew that one too. So that's definitely the core of it. But I'm just wondering about how much it was, like, from his point of view, how much was from the organizations.
We did speak about this a lot on last week, especially with the Danish thing, and we were alluding. Oh, we've spoken about this topic quite a lot in recent times, and
Yep.
about the coach, usually being the one to fall when things aren't working in traditional sports. But that's when the coach is given, the full dominion on the way things work. We've definitely noted with Counter-Strike that isn't the case as much at the moment. So I think
But it was with North.
Yeah,
though.
with North
like North
it
and
was,
Astras were two of the very few teams that actually did it this way. That the coach actually had a lot of power over the team, basically like almost complete power.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the reason why we're seeing this happen. The big question mark now, though, obviously with North, they've got this tournament coming up. It starts tomorrow, I believe. The one in London. It's got the 4 teams there. Navi's there, Avantgarde, North, and I'm forgetting a name. Heroic. Those are the 4 teams that are going to be there, I believe, if I checked it correctly.
Yeah.
But that just leaves, okay, where are they going to go with the direction of this, right? We know there's a lot of good Danish players. Obviously, Carrigan's been thrown around as a potential name, but that means he's coming in to swap out a player. If that was to happen in that way, I think that the problem with this change is that what are we really going to see different, because this team has already been pushing out the correct attitude, right? Like they've been posing themselves as the professional team that they're meant to be. It just feels like there's been too much pressure put on them by themselves, and that's why they haven't been getting the results. I don't know, obviously, how much the two of you want to about this, but Sergey and Janko, in practice and stuff, did North feel like a force? Did they feel like a team to be fearing when you come into these kind of events, or did it just feel like you don't put too much stock in practice? Or whatever answer you can give me is fine.
Yeah, I don't really think for any team you can say based off of practice, right? Because in practice it's very hard. Sometimes teams are trying to just try out new stuff. With some teams, like tier 1 teams, don't really practice that much between themselves, like the top 5 teams, because you see when you do try and practice, the other team isn't really doing much. It seems like they're just trying to scout you and see what you're going to do, to take some notes. So you try to avoid that, really. At the very top, for me, North was a team that I always, was fine practicing against. I thought they played well. I think if anything, something that hindered them as well, they were making so many changes. They were changing like players all the time. Like, yeah, of course they didn't have, success, so you could argue that changes were necessary, but you need to give some roster, a certain amount of time to really see if things can work out or not. Maybe the first time you have 5 players, you didn't set the roles properly, or you didn't play in a proper style that suits those players. I mean, they win DreamHack Stockholm, which, sure, you can say it was a fluke, but you still need to win that tournament somehow. Bomb out at the major, and then because of that, they decide to change their in-game leader. Like, changing an in-game leader is the biggest change you can make in a team, right? And then you had I don't know, Config and like Cajun leaving like earlier very early in 2018. Then the Nico comes in. Then they had Merz, and they had like Mixwell played with them at a tournament. It was just all over the place. So I think for them it really is a combination of things. That's why it's so difficult to give an answer. What's the solution for North when it comes to the coach having a lot of power? I think in that sense, if he indeed did have power to change players and to organize the game and everything, and he did have a lot of time to see those things through, if it really isn't like giving results, then it makes sense for him to also be let go. But in reality, it's very hard to know unless someone from the org or from the team speaks out how much was the coach allowed to do, how much influence did he have, how much did the players listen to him. And that's only when you can for sure say, because I know, because I've been in both positions right now. I've been an analyst looking from the outside and saying, oh, this coach looks like he's doing a lot. And then, for some coaches, you don't really think like they're doing that much. And then you move on to the other side and you realize how difficult it can be at times, and also you hear from other teams, who's actually doing something, who's not, and it's not as black and white as maybe sometimes we think we see it.
But I mean, going back to the in-game leader, I mean, changing the in-game leader, like MSL has been like one of the most stable ones, but when it comes to like changing teams, obviously has been a part of the same team for, I don't know what it is now, maybe 4 years, 5 years even, that he's been in Dignitas and blah blah blah, and just has basically survived until Stockholm, right, or until after the major. Anyway, so I mean, you could also make the case that MSL throughout all those years, he hasn't even can't speak. He hasn't been able to take that team to the next level, right? They've always stayed around that, like on the brink of like top 10, maybe a little bit higher at times, but
Yeah.
never really breaking into the true elite.
I agree, and you could argue that earlier on he didn't have the benefit of having the best players from his country play for his team. His players were always getting poached. But definitely in North, that wasn't the case. I mean, you even had, obviously, Kirby leaving Astralis to join North. But that's why I say it's a complicated situation. I agree with what you said about MSL, that he was on the same level for a lot of time, and his teams were. But then what happened with AZ, for example? Like in his time in Dignitas, and then early on in FaZe, it was like, oh, AZ is like insane, like he's a super skill. He was playing amazingly well. Now he's considered a support player, like how does that really happen? Kirby as well, like definitely not consistently playing on a super high level like he was at times, even in Astralis. If anything, obviously Valde is now probably, I mean, for sure their star player and their most consistent player. And for what we've played against them, or I have played against them a little bit here and there, Gade is also someone who seems to have like good impact for a team, a guy who just seems like super sound mechanically and just, can frag really well. So, you have those two guys. Now, obviously, KDN is relatively recently added. So that then you question, okay, so could we change some of these guys who we brought in as stars, but it just isn't working out? Is the in-game leader like set? Coach, right now they've changed the coach. So that's one of the changes they decided to go with, and we'll see what's going to happen moving forward. Is after the major, are they going to have any additional roster changes? But it really does seem like it's a lot of things that have impacted North not living up to the hype or to the potential that they most definitely have.
I think this particular change was announced at this point just because of the family issue with Ave. Obviously, like you say, after the major is when we'll probably learn about mousesports as well. Like, who knows what kind of options they have at this point, right? They could go for the Kerrigan plus Valde combo because those are the players that are not going to be at the major. So they could just genuinely actually go for that change specifically. But obviously, there aren't that many other options until the major ends and like all the swaps happen, right? So I feel like this change is just the first of a few. I don't think the coaching change is the single one that's going to happen. I feel like North will just tap into somebody, some of the other Danish teams as well. Maybe make a swap with Optic, who obviously also failed. So I feel like this is just the first of many changes in the sub or like non-Astralis Danish scene that we talked about in the last episode.
Sure. Sergey, you got any thoughts on the North situation?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when they changed MSL, you told that coach basically get the full power of a team, right? Maybe when MSL was in a team that wasn't possible because he was affecting team way more than nowadays in-game leader, right?
Sure.
And maybe only after that coach get all these things. But on the other hand, as you told guys, it's a combination of things. I have one kid and it's pretty hard. If you have two, it's even harder. If you have three, well,
you're basically fucked. I'm pretty sure you're fucked at the point of having
yeah, so basically I'm pretty sure he just can't like do a full-time job at the same time. So yeah, but I'm expecting definitely the Danish shuffle sooner or later. Because
it has to come. It has to come after North and Optic both failed at the minor. There's no way there are no changes between them.
Even Heroic, like I was casting a tournament all these 5 days. I watched Heroic, and it's not a team right now, even.
Yeah, they just added Blame F, right?
I mean, they added Blame F. I feel like that could lead somewhere, but at the same time, like he might as well just like go over to North if he actually shows up in London or whatever. Like he could definitely get a chance further. Because I'm not entirely sure North could tap into anybody else from Heroic. And with Optic, I don't know what the like interpersonal issues are, because a lot of them have obviously played with each other for a long time. So God knows how much they want to come back to that or anything like that. We never know how these kind of interpersonal relationships come into play.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Well, I think over the last couple of weeks we've definitely done the Danish discussion to death with all these different changes that happen. So we're going to move on to the next section, which is the Master Better part of our podcast. Now, for Janko and Sergey, sorry, this is basically not going to involve you at all. This is Striker going to be talking about a little head-to-head competition that he has going on with Prof, and they're putting in bets over the last all the weeks until the end of the major. Yeah. So basically, what's going to happen here is they're going to do whoever loses this. So the idea is to make the most money. Whoever loses this can do. Did we decide on the chili challenge? You guys are going to eat some extremely hot chilies, I believe. Okay. Yeah. And we decided because they were both from Eastern Europe that they don't like spicy food. So that makes sense.
I just saw just to comment on the Eastern Europe thing. I just saw a picture out of an American textbook about geography, and it lists Czech Republic as a Western country.
Okay. Well, look, we might need to
I can use that now. Huh?
Well, then you're going to like spicy food, so we might have to change the challenge.
Exactly.
All right, where are we at? Is this up to date, or is this from last week?
This is up to date. This is up to date. This is episode 5. You can see that at the bottom. So at this point, I'm maybe like a little bit over 226 behind, because Prof made a lot of money in the second one, or in the first actually, and now he lost the second one, and now we're in the third week, in our third try. Basically, just as a disclaimer to people out there, basically follow me if you want to just about lose some money, because I've just been losing like bits and pieces, like $13 the first week, and like $5 the second week. So just like follow me if you want to lose a little bit of money, basically. But this time, actually, Prof doesn't really have anything to defend himself because he's obviously not here. So I guess we could
well, as a great favor, I'm going to step in for him
there you go.
Necessary.
I mean, we have wait, what is it? Red Reserve against Wendigo. What is that tournament even?
Oh, we
That's
don't
the thing.
even know.
Like, we obviously don't know about
from.
each other's bets because we would like just so that it's not affected.
I don't even know there was a Unicorns of Love Counter-Strike team.
I like that. I like the picture of Prof just like peeking out of the slip. It's pretty cool.
Oh, they're German. Okay, that explains a lot.
Yeah, but I'm
right.
Okay. So he went for Wendigo to beat Red Reserve. Unicorns of Love to beat Blue Jays. What is this Counter-Strike? I don't even know what kind of tournament
Hold
this
up,
is.
Navi's there. That's a good one.
Navi's the ice challenge. I have that too, actually. He has the winner of the tournament, I think. Yeah, that has to be it. So he has Navi. That's the one that we're going to talk about later about the ice challenge shows. So he has the winner of that tournament. I mean, Navi is the winner of that tournament. So that's the one I understand. The other two, those are just basically somewhat random. But I mean, Wendigo, to bet on Wendigo against Red Reserve is pretty reasonable. And even the odds seem to say so. I mean, it's fairly reasonable, I feel like.
Oh, we don't really care about his because he can't justify him. So Lucas, let's bring up strikers if we can.
Yeah. I mean, I had the same thing with Navi. I'm actually surprised he could combo this, honestly. I'm not sure if he can combo this because like you have a winner of the tournament and like matchup winners. I'm not sure he can do it, but I guess he can from like between tournaments. But anyway, I had the same thing, but I had the singles because I couldn't do multiple bets within the same tournament with the winner of the tournament. You can't do that. Like there's some limit against it. So I basically went maxed out for the Navi to win ice challenge just because I feel like they should have no competition there. Like yes.
So even though Navi starts slow every single time they start a tournament, you still reckon they're going to 2-0. All right.
Yes.
All right.
I have a feeling that like this break is actually going to do some good to them instead of what they usually actually do. But I mean, it could be the same case as we always have. But I just feel like I could make some buck on this, especially with those kind of odds. 166 on a 2-0 for a favorite of a match is pretty good, I feel like. So that's what I went for. Navi to win the tournament. They just have no competition. Yes, they could start slow because they haven't played anything in 2 months almost. I can understand that, but I still feel like they're pretty heavy favorites. And to close out, I actually went for North to win against Avantgarde because they have much higher odds. Like Avantgarde had something like 1.6, so they're pretty heavily favored in that matchup. But I actually went for North just because at this point I feel like sure they failed against Vici, but that was kind of like a. I don't think that was the true North, even though they haven't actually played very well for a longer period of time. But still, Vanguard should be a matchup that they should be winning on a normal day. So that's why I went for North, especially with those odds.
All right. Well, that all seems pretty reasonable. I think we'll just move on to the next one because we don't have the banter between you and Prof here, unfortunately.
Yeah, he can't defend himself. So
it's a bit unfair. We won't beat him out while he's down. We're going to move into more drama, and we're going to move across to the smooya situation with Big. Now, this is another thing that we just recently discussed on the last episode, and that's when DK reported the news. And I think we treaded pretty lightly in the way that we spoke about all this because it wasn't confirmed at the time, and we were just basically stating the obvious. So for those of you who missed it, Next, he went out for an injury. They had Zantares come in to be his replacement in the interim. Then there was discussion about doing some six-man roster nonsense, which we had a whole discussion about, but basically that's ridiculous.
Nobody bought it, basically.
Then there's a bit of rumors about what they were going to do. It sounded like Next was going to replace Gobby, and then Gobby would be the coach. And then the next thing happened, smooya came out and he stepped down. Now, before we get stuck into this, I want to make sure that we kind of preface this because I think this is a really big part of this situation. It'd be very easy if you are a guy who doesn't speak the language to feel ostracized from a team from the very beginning. I understand that. Those words have been discussed from smooya publicly. But I think the thing here is we don't know how this situation, if he was pressured into this. We don't know if the writing was on the wall. We don't know those bits and pieces for this situation unfolding. But what we do know is throughout smooya's time on Big, he was very sporadic and very cryptic and maybe too emotional in his tweets and stuff, which to me speaks about his personality because we do know what type of guy that he can be, very loud, very fiery. LMBT and his boys had a bit of a run-in with them at a Star Ladder when some nonsense was going on there. But all in all, this kid, unfortunately, I think, maybe he's been a little bit of his own undoing. You look at the personnel change of this. We have Next coming back in, so he's taking over the position of an AWPer. He's mainly a rifler, which now puts Tabson into more of a AWP-heavy position. Not necessarily how Counter-Strike has to be played right now, but the main point of this. Let's break this down. First of all, let's get a discussion across the board. Do people think this team is going to be better without smooya, with the addition of Next? First and foremost.
I think it's hard to tell. I think they probably will because it doesn't matter if you would argue that smooya is a better player or if he would fully opt that would be better for the team. If you cannot build that chemistry, and I'm not saying everyone be best friends, but if one guy really doesn't fit the team, it turns into that atmosphere that I'm sure Chad, from when you've been playing, is like you don't really like this guy, so you're just waiting for him to make a mistake so you can harp on it and so you can bother him about it. And whenever he says something to you, even what he's saying to you is constructive criticism, you don't want to accept it as such because you don't like the guy and he doesn't fit or whatnot. So I think in that sense, probably in the short term at the very least, it's going to make Big better because you're going to have that honeymoon phase of, oh yeah, we finally made this change. Now we can finally do things the way we want them to be done and so on. So I think that will probably be the main reason for them performing maybe a little bit better, at least in the short run.
I mean, I'm just worried about his form. Not really because he has been out for a couple of weeks. Hasn't really been that long compared to most of the teams. He's basically been out the same kind of time. But now that he actually played a couple of matches with the team at the We Play Lock and Load thing, and he didn't look good there at all. I saw one of the matches that they played against Hellraisers, and he was very, very bad in that match. So I'm just a little worried about his form and how the wrist issue could still be affecting him. I mean, Big said that it was basically fixed, that he just needs to attend a regular therapy or something like that. But it still sounds like something that could affect you. At least in the short term. So that's the thing I'm worried about, and that's why I would say that in the short term, I feel like they will be worse just because of Next potentially not being up to his best.
Do you guys know the info? Did they really submitted 6 players to the major?
Yeah, they were prepared for this.
Okay.
They clearly knew about this potentially happening later in January, basically, that smooya was going to leave because they put Next as the coach. And so they had smooya in the active roster. So smooya's probably going to get stickers, even though he's not going to play the major, basically.
Calculated.
What we assume is that Big are just going to swap, before the first match, they're just going to put in the swap between smooya next. So feels bad for next that he's not gonna have stickers, but whatever.
Yeah, but I think also what's funny to me is like just reading the interview that smooya gave and talking about the issues that they have, and saying stuff like wasn't happy, on top of having the feeling that they wanted me gone for some time because I let some of the teammates down on a personal level by being on my phone during practice and stupid reasons like that. Like the amount of dumb stuff like that I hear, like about players on teams and stuff, it's like, how hard is it when you're boot camping or practicing to not check Instagram, not chat with other people, for your focus only to be on your job, which is playing a video game? It's not working in a coal mine. It's not using your brain for something super strenuous. It's doing something you would be doing the whole day anyway, just on a more serious level where you can't like just decide when you want to play and how you want to play. You actually have to play to win and to improve. But we're going to start arguing about, but why can't I just text, I'm dead anyway? So
I had teammates who would use the Steam overlay to log into those like Facebook, Twitter, all that shit, so they didn't even have to alt tab when they were dead, and they could just sit in that shit. And they had the audacity to sit next to me and do that fucking nonsense. I think this was actually where I was going to take the conversation next, is talking about the personalities in the teams, and we've already kind of touched on it, but you've alluded to it quite a lot in this regard, Janko. And the fact that having somebody in the team who just sticks out like a sore thumb for whatever personal reason, this is very contrasting, because what you were saying, Sergey, was the way that mousesports was structured. It was a job, right? And obviously, certain people got along with each other better than others. That's kind of just the way the world works. But do you foresee, and we can kind of bring this conversation full circle, but the fact that we have teams who are made up of all these different nations, and culturally speaking, etc., it's a difficult thing to do, and just people even from the same countries. Do you think that this is an issue with the fact that we do just in Counter-Strike have 5 players on a roster? We saw recently with E United having Cooper coming in, right? And that inspired every other player to try as hard as they could so they didn't lose their paycheck, right? Because nobody wants to be booted off the team and lose that income that's coming in. Do you think that, like, all in all, if we did have like a 6th or 7th member on the roster ready to come in and step in when somebody fucked up, we could remove all of these personality issues, and people like this, or like I've alluded to, like Janko's been talking about, they wouldn't exist anymore, and people might take their jobs more seriously, because it all seems too easy for some of these kids.
I mean, look, for me, like how I see it, because I was thinking about this topic honestly. First, we need the rule change, right? Because right now you can only do the 6 people for major, so it should be 7. In any case, second part, you will never find young player whose ego will not have ego to sit on a bench and jump in when he's ready, right? So that's a good option for like old skilled player who can just stream, who know everything, every smoke, every detail of the game, all the info of the team. So if you're benching some old player in the team who can just stick in the team, still have salary, still can play, and then you have situation, for example, like in CIS team, someone didn't receive visa, someone became sick, someone done whatever, and you can play with your old player, not with a coach, who can basically fulfill most of the roles anyway, except maybe op, unless he is OPer. It's anyway better for a team than to play with a coach, right?
Of course.
So I think that's a really good option for like older players, but I don't see any single chance that you can have like not multiple, but 6, 7 players roster with young players. There is no chance. They want to play.
I think this is exactly what we landed on when we spoke about this last time, Striker.
Yeah.
We spoke about this
exactly
in a bit of detail,
and
names like Nothing were thrown around. Pimp was an example of somebody who streams, and he could maybe fulfill both of those types of roles. I think that
just generally, we also kind of landed on the same thing of just the 6th player being both a substitute and a coach just doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
That completely kind of ruins the, I guess, the integrity of certain situations, especially when it happens at majors. So let's pray that none of those problems crop up this time around, and we can avoid all that. Because so far we've been looking good. But I think the question mark, for me around this big situation, sure, they've been able to bring next in, and maybe they're going to be happier with the personalities in the team going here. But if you look at the way this is going to affect somebody like Tabson, who has always been a very fiery personality, right? I remember seeing him when he was playing, when it was Godby, Legia, and Tabson playing in the NRG days. He was always very loud, very fired up. It was that it was that Brazilian event we were at, Janko. I forget the
Pro
one it was.
finals.
That's the one, and that was the first time I saw him playing on LAN. He was, and for good reason, because he's a fantastic player. But in my experience, those type of players, and we all know the type of player who I'm talking about, that's the type of player who he obviously does his best when he gets to do his own thing. Now, he's been working in within Godby's system, but Godby's played with him for years, so knows how to get the most out of him. When you have somebody like that who picks up the AWP in a secondary position, they're the type of guy who likes to pick it up in the secondary position. And then they have these dreams, they're sitting there one day playing deathmatch, or they play an FPL game, and then they have like a sick game with the AWP, and they think to themselves, fuck, I can be a primary AWPer. That's the problem I have, is that Tabson's probably going to try this for a certain period of time, and if his performance dips even a little bit, I see that having a really adverse effect on the rest of the team, right? The problem there being, I don't want to be the primary AWPer anymore, we're going to change positions, change roles, and he's the type of guy who will get his way in that regard. So for me, if he can't stick to the guns of being the primary AWPer, or if they try and use him like a primary AWPer and don't do more what Liquid's doing or was doing, where they had Nitro using it as a utility, less as a spearhead of the attack, then they might run into some issues. That's probably the only issue I see here, because right now they've removed the quantity of the team that was the X factor in terms of personality, so they everything should simmer down a little bit in that regard. Zentara's, he seems like he has a fantastic work ethic, and just him as a fragger, he's going to be contributing more in that sense. So it is what you might mention, Striker. The short term is, are they going to be able to get Next back up to where he needs to be in a short period of time? And to be fair, they have 2 whole weeks to get that done. So, does anyone else have any big stuff they want to interject here on before we...
I mean, just generally, I feel like on the Tabson topic and him opping, to be fair, he's been picking it up a lot for a secondary opper. Like, they play the double op very, very often on the CT side, like almost the majority of the time. Even just like now, I just randomly checked how many op kills he has, and it's 30% of his kills. Like obviously his most used weapon is AK with 38 or something, and that's 2018 LAN, by the way.
They're trying to say he's been getting ready for this for a while now.
I'm not saying he's been getting ready, but he's definitely up there when it comes to like secondary oppers. Like 30% for a secondary opper is a lot of op kills. I feel like he's been picking it up even from like the eye test. Just felt like he picked it up on the CT side almost all the time on maps where it made sense. I feel like it's not going to be that big of an issue. It just depends on how they deal with it on the T side. If he's still going to be picking it up a lot, or if like SPUNJ said, they're going to go maybe closer to a Liquid route and just play more of a 5 rifle setup.
Yeah, I think just on the note of talking about teams having multiple players on the rosters, like 6-7 man rosters, I don't think that's viable until the circuit changes. You have a closed circuit or something like that, because how is a team like FaZe or MIBR or Astralis or Navi, how are they going to find a player that's good enough to sub in for them, but not good enough to be a starting player on a Hellraisers or a North, an Optic, or whatever, like it's very difficult to tell to that player, hey, it's better off for you to be on the bench for our team than to be the starting player for the other team. So I don't think that's really viable, but I think what's necessary is for players coming into a team and coming into an organization to realize that they're coming in a working environment, and from the moment they join the team, that was the problem for before, right? Teams were almost exclusively 5 players together coming into an org, and they're sticking together, and the org should, get on their knees and fucking thank them for joining that particular team, and whatever you want, we're gonna give to you. Just thank you that you're playing for us, right? I don't think the situation is the same anymore. There's a lot of individual players being swapped in and out and so forth, and I think players need to be more accountable and need to be more responsible and more aware of what is it exactly that they have, what is the position in which they're in, where nothing fell from the sky for them. They invested a lot of time and everything into what they do, but that now comes with some responsibility when the salaries are higher and the conditions at the tournaments are better and the prize money is high, right? Like when you can make a living off of this, that comes with some responsibility in many different ways, and one of it is that realizing, you know, how you need to approach in practice. There's a great quote from, I don't even remember which football player, but it was, you know, how do you get so hyped up for practice? Why are you so emotional in practice? You know, why do you take it 110%? He says, this is what I get paid for. Like, anyone can get out on a Sunday in front of 50,000 people and give it his best, but how are you going to do it on a Monday, on a Tuesday, when you're sore, when everything's hurting? It's like, that's where you earn your money. So I think it should, in a way, it's similar for players in CS. You get paid to practice. Like, do you go to a tournament? How can you not get excited? Of course, you're going to give your best. You play in Cologne in front of 10,000 screaming fans in a massive arena, right? But what are you gonna do on that stage is what you set up in practice and what you work on. And I think that's why Astralis is the #1 team in the world. I think that's the main reason, is their approach and their understanding of what needs to be done and how they're going to do it. And to be honest, like, I don't know how much this is the general knowledge, but becoming a coach, I've seen Astralis they are probably the tier 1 team that practices the least, you know, and it's because they realize they need to have this balance in players' lives where, especially when you're the #1 team in the world and you're winning everything, how do you keep staying motivated? Of course you want to win more, but you know, it's hard. Everyone's looking at you, everyone's anti-stratting you, you know, stealing your stuff and so on. And you know, that way of keeping things fresh and just making small changes and having the players be disciplined enough to not lose focus and still know what they're doing individually, that's what allows them to have that approach. Other teams don't have that luxury. They have to play 6 maps a day because they have to go over so much stuff. You know, they need to iron out their map pool. They need to work on some of the fundamentals. You know, they have to catch up on so many things. So for me, it's kind of that. This was a bit of a rant, but you know,
No, that's
No,
good.
but I mean,
I've let
you're
it
definitely
out.
right though. It just has to come with like a change of landscape as a whole. Just because obviously organizations at this point, like you said, don't have enough power to kind of force these players into being more professional and just hold them accountable. If they keep being on their phone, to use whatever
I
smooya
think
said
just
in
to
that
like
interview.
say one thing, it's not that for people watching this, it's not that players don't play enough. At least most of the players that I've been around, like, people play a lot. It's just that sometimes when they're playing, it's not as productive. Whether they're playing some dumb stuff like FPL, or at least even if they're playing it, they're not learning anything from it. Or it is in practice that you're not focused enough, right? And you're playing for 6 hours, you're there, you're practicing with the team, but it's not as productive as it could be.
So just with that, then we can maybe grab that and I won't pry too hard here. If it's too much information, then that's cool. But from the both of you and your coaching methods, what are you guys looking at as the more ideal ways to get the most out of your practice? Right, I remember talking to you, Sergey, at one event, and you said we practice something like 5 maps a day because the most you could play is a best of 5. Right? Is that still where your head's at, or like in terms of efficiency of practice? What's your view on that?
No, it depends on what state team currently are. Like,
Sure.
for example, you made replacements, right? And as Janko told, you can be in search of your game, in search of your map pool, or you can just, as Astrala is doing, just creating 1-2 new things, right? And just keep the shape and stuff. So it just depends, like, what you're preparing for and which position you are right now. Are you preparing to play online league for a month, or like before at least, right? Or you have like tournament to tournament and then you're playing, depends on what can be there. For example, before minor, I was trying to force team to play 6 maps because at one day you can play 6 maps, no break,
Sure.
right? So even like physically wise, you have to be ready for that. In any case, you have to keep focus for this 5, 6, 7 hours sometimes, because like best of 5 for us, for example, we played 2 best of 5 finals. It's 7 hours, both of them. And you have to be focused for all 7 hours, right? You have to be ready for it. It depends. Sometimes you can play 3, 4 maps per day and focus only on being productive, right? Sometimes you need hours. Sometimes you need this 7 hours focus. So it depends on what you need before tournament.
Sure. So Janko, you just went from one team to the next team, and like obviously you're not starting ground up, right? When you obviously Adren was still the new addition as well, and you have a lot to teach. But it looks like from what you guys, the only thing that looks like it's changing for you is the direction of map pool. At least that was one of the takeaways I had from the E-League event, was that you're now prioritizing different maps. At least when you came into this, was there a way that you said, okay, this is the way we want to efficiently do it, or is it just work with what they've got and see what happens?
No, I think with coming into phase and the map pool, our goal for the 2 tournaments we attended was to just play as many maps as possible and as many series to get a good sample size for, did we set up things properly? What do we need to work on? How does each map look like? And I think we got a good sense of that moving forward. We plan to play all 7 maps coming into the major because this is a team that has done it before, and it really helps you being. I think that's the difference between some of these teams. That they're great on even 4 maps maybe, but when it comes to a best of 3 and they can veto one out, and then you can pick something they don't play and maybe even force it into a third to be a map that they don't play that often because they have to veto nuke against you. I think that's just a big strength, big advantage coming into it. When it comes to the organizing practice and stuff, that's my responsibility basically. That's my job, so I have full control over that. Of course, I do, talk to the players to make sure like that's fine. But my psychology about it is, my approach is, I think that these players, at least in the 2 teams that I've coached, I consider both teams like the players are very skilled, very experienced. They've been around for a long time, so it's not necessary really to go over, like to play a lot of maps for people to go over a strat so they know how to execute it, right? Like you should be able to do that on the fly, and most of the times that's the case. For me, I think it's always better to talk more and review more and do more theory than play. I would much rather play only 4 maps, but have meet an hour and a half before we play the first 2, then have a break in between for people to eat and to discuss some things for the second 2 maps, and then play those 2 maps, and for that to be it. Obviously, as Sergey said, depending on where your team is and how much stuff you need to go through, you're obviously going to play more maps, especially if you're boot camping, because this team plays online when people are home. So I'm always looking at something like when we're online, we meet like an hour and a half before practice, we play 3 maps, then we have a 2-hour break, which like an hour of that is for food, an hour is again to do some prep, and then 2 more maps, and that's it. On boot camp it's the same, we just an added extra map in the second block, right? Because I think the problem that a lot of people have and teams have, they play just to play, like they meet up, maybe add like a couple of strats, let's add these 2 strats on this map and let's play 5 maps now. And you don't even know why are you playing, like you're practicing. So what are you trying to practice? Just playing for the sake of playing doesn't help you at all if you're trying to be like the number 1 team in the world, right? You need to know why you're doing things. You need to know why you're moving on the map. Why are you calling this strat in this round? What are you going to do? You don't want to be in a situation where you're starting off a game, you lose pistol, let's say a CT on Mirage, you eco the first one, then you buy the third, but you had no idea why didn't we force the second, eco third, and buy the fourth? Why are we doing this? We need to have a plan for these rounds because the dynamic changes, right? The T's have saved Mac 10s and some shit guns, and they're probably going to play something fast or execute on you, right? You need to have a plan for that round if you're doing it. Otherwise, you're just going to be down 4-0, and then the game is going to start for you. You can't start every half 4-0 down, right? So I think for me, that's really important, like for people to be prepared to have at least a general plan coming into the game. It doesn't have to be super rigid, every round needs to go like this, the first 10 rounds. No, but I think it also helps the players to not feel like the pressure when they know exactly what they're doing, right? It's something that you went over in practice lots of times, like, even if the game is close, let's say it's 14-14, but you have good money and their buy is not ideal, and your in-game leader calls something that you've done 5 times already, you're not thinking about 14-14. Like, you just focus on doing something you already done like 5, 10, 15 times, 100 times, and that way you're confident because you're just doing the same thing. You don't have to do anything crazy. You don't have to improvise like in the 30th round of a game. You just have something that you have at least tried out and you're confident in, okay, we know how to do this. Let's like just try to execute it as best as we can.
Okay. Well, there's a lot more
Uh,
going on with the evolution of that than I was. I was ready for.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
don't
I
know.
agree with Janko.
It's just kind of how you feel like, right? Because a lot of things, these players are all very, very skilled, like very good players. I think it's safe to say, you look at Astralis, they don't have the 5 best players in the world, right? They don't have arguably the 5 most skilled players that are on one team, but they are by far the best team, and the best team will win. It's a team game, right? So that just tells you the reason why they're so good and why it's so hard to play against them, why their map pool is so strong. It's not because they have insane strats on every map or setups or anything like that. It's just because they play so fundamentally sound CS that always in situational Counter-Strike, when it's 4v3s, 3v4s, 2v3s, they're always going to play strong. And you are never going to win a game or lose a game solely based, well, you might lose it, but you're never going to win it solely based off of like the strats you execute. Strat is going to get you into a 4v3. You're going to hopefully have an advantageous situation post-plant, and that's what the strat is supposed to do. It's not supposed to wipe the team out, right? But then you need to play those situations properly, and that's where teams get, they overextend just a little bit, and Astralis is so strong at, waiting for people to make that small mistake and punishing them for it, and all of a sudden, you see a team executing B Mirage on them, they get both kills maybe, it's like 5v3, it's impossible to lose this round. And then some guy shows up somewhere, the lurker starts moving too fast, and it's a 3v3 out of nowhere, and then they, Zipex clutches a 1v2, of course, or something like that in the end. But, that happens so often that you can't even say, oh, he does, like just how good they are, or how good he is in those situations, right? You count on it happening in contrast to being surprised by it. So that's why you need to step up in that. You need to, otherwise you can just gonna watch them lifting trophies for a long time.
I mean, we're really wildly out of topic, but still we have plenty of time left. So I'm just curious about what you now think, looking back at MIBR's series against Astralis. Obviously, you were one of the very few teams that could consistently take them to close matches. I just wonder how you looked at the matchup and why you think it was that way.
That it was close?
Yeah.
I think it was because, we were losing. We felt good after Stockholm, then we got beat pretty bad at the major, and then we had the close series after a terrible first map in Turkey. So we felt after Turkey, we felt like we should have won that final, and we felt that we finally figured out how to play against them. So after that point, every time we played Astralis, we were pretty comfortable coming into the game. Not to go too much into details, but of course,
sure.
one of the very important factors is the in-game leader really feeling like he knows how to call and he knows the adjustments he has to make on the fly, and what are maybe some of the individual plays that players need to go for to really make things work against a team like Astralis. So I think it was that us, after a couple of trial and error situations, we realized, okay, so this is what's been happening a lot in these games, and even in just some of the games that we won or the games that were really close, the things that we were doing well, we just looked at it, recognized it, and said, okay, we need to do more of A and less of B, and then things can work out well for us.
Cool.
Just quickly, does anybody want to buy Windigo?
Oh yeah, I saw that.
My Bulgarians?
It's being sold on Reddit, basically.
I just saw a retweet of the starting lineup of Windigo Gaming set for transfer. Today we announced that Windigo players, along with a coach, are marketed. All right, well,
that would be great if me, Kasad, and Nico, pool our money and buy them out after playing against them, our whole career here. Is the Balkan El Clasico, so now we own them. I'm gonna write Kasad to suggest that to him.
See how much the buyout is.
I need to find and link it to him, All
right. What we're gonna do is we're gonna move on to the next topic, and the next topic is talking about the major seeding. So I gotta click that bad boy. There we go. So what we've done here, for those who aren't aware, next week the first stage of the major kicks off, which is the Challenger Series, or the Challenger stage, sorry, and that used to be the major qualifier. So I know a lot of people are still a little bit pedantic about the terminology, but via Valve, it's the Challenger stage. Now, the interesting thing that ESL have been able to do is get a seeding push through. Now, the way that this seeding works for everybody playing at home is all of the teams will rank themselves and each other from 1 to 16 within the realms of all the teams in the Challenger stage. Now, after each round, a team wins and loses, an ELO system is going to be used to seed them accordingly for the next round of matchups. All in all, a positive change to the nonsense that we've been using in the past. But what I wanted to do was, I believe Lucas has mocked us up a graphic here. And on this graphic should have how the teams are currently seeded going from the HLTV.org rankings. So let me read this out for everybody playing at home. The rankings changed today. So right now, if we were to use the HLTV.org rankings to seed the teams from 1 to 16 in the Challenger stage, it's Fnatic, NRG, Cloud9, Ninjas in Pajamas, Easy for Ents, RNG, Vitality, G2, Spirit, Furia, Avantgarde, Windstrike, Tyloo, Greyhound, Vici, and Vega coming in the last position. Now what we're going to do is, we obviously have the brains here to pick of Mr. Janko and Sergey, who will be playing against these teams on a much more regular basis and getting to see kind of what they think, how the teams here should stack up. Now, for everybody at home, we only get to watch what the teams are doing when we see officials. We don't get the privilege of being there to know who's good in practice and who's not. So, Janko, what I'll do is I'll get you to kick it off first, because we'll do 2 independent lists. There's going to be a bit of moving around on this kind of nonsense. But if you had to rank these teams from 1 to 16 with all the teams you can see on the board here, where are you starting? You don't have to give your rationale, but let's if you can if you want, but let's kick it off. Who would you put as number 1, and then we'll work down the list.
Can we do I think it's easier if we do some sort of a bracket, teams I would put all close,
Sure,
the top 5 or 4, because between them, I wouldn't really know how to differentiate them per se. Let's say I would put Fnatic, NIP, NRG, Ents, Cloud9, Vitality. Those would be my kind of first tier of teams. Yeah, Vitality would be right there with Renegades. Then I would put Vega, Avantgarde.
Vega's right down the bottom, Lucas. So move Vega all the way up.
Vega is definitely the one that has to go up quite a bit, just because they're just the classic of we have no idea. But they've always kind of surprised us, right? Before, at basically every single major, they were also kind of in contention to go up in the second stage or whatever it was in the past. So I feel like this is a good placing for them as well.
Yeah, I think his question, Energy, they're way up. They are top 3, let's say. Put them there, yeah. So where we are, Vega, Avantgarde, G2. Yeah, I think G2, it's still hard to tell. I think the changes have been good for them, but obviously playing at the major is a high pressure environment, so see how the new guys are going to cope. I think they're fine where they are right now. And then after this, it gets a bit murky. Furia, I didn't expect them to qualify. I think even, if you ask about practice, it didn't really look like much. But I think the Brazilians are definitely teams that have a lot of heart, play with a lot of passion, and they're definitely scary when they have momentum, because individually they have some really good, players mechanically. So I think they're pretty fine where they are. I think maybe would put Spirit below them, maybe. Yeah, I think for this very end of the bracket, you obviously want to put Tyloo a bit higher, because they have some players that have played at the major and have played internationally for a while, but they've also changed 2 players. So I think for example, those last 6 teams, I would have no idea who to put.
Yeah, they could be. I think Vici is the one that probably is at the bottom, though. Out of all of those teams, I probably would put Vici all the way down.
Yeah, and the rest of them are, pretty close. I think, some of those teams are definitely going to ruin someone else's day. I don't really see any of these teams coming out and making the major and making the top 16, but they are definitely going to get a win here or there and make it more difficult for some of these other teams to really make it through.
So
I
all
think
in,
this looks pretty fair.
it's pretty
Maybe
similar,
put
right?
RNG. Maybe would put Renegades ahead of Vitality as well, simply because Vitality is still, they've been together for a while now, but it's even with like the change with Alex. I think it's like the Zaiwu, the Zaiwu factor is what makes you put him up that high. He's been just like doing so much for them. Some games they probably should have ended up losing. He's definitely tipped the odds in their scale. So you have to respect that.
I think like if you looked at your list there and you were to put like a spoiler team in if you were to pick your top 7 and then have like a spoiler as the 8th, it'd be pretty hard to come up with an 8th team. Like it feels like the pack is pretty, I don't want to say even, but wide open, especially now that we have the best of 3s of the gateways to get through. It's going to be very unique to see the matchups there. And there obviously, like you mentioned, there's going to be some spoiler results. But just quickly, for those who don't understand the line of questioning here, this is because the teams are actually going to be seeding each other. So however they've practiced against each other or whatever they know about each other from practice is how they're going to be ranking the teams, which is also quite curious because certain teams here won't be practicing each other. I'm sure that Sergey and Janko can attest that if you consider your biggest threat at this whole tournament to be NRG or NIP or Fnatic, one of those big names, and you're another big name, you're likely not going to practice against them at all. You're probably, like in this kind of format, a lot of shit gets thrown around. There is always that opportunity, but you're probably going to try and avoid these bigger teams so you're not giving away a lot of stuff, especially in the lead into the biggest tournament. So just off the HLTV.org ranking, we're going to get Sergey's list, see if it's much different from that of Janko's and the HLTV.org one. But if you use the HLTV.org rankings as they are right now, these would be the opening matchups, and nothing here sounds outside of the realms of reality. So you'd have Fnatic versus Vega, you'd have NRG
I think
versus
that one off the bat is the one that I would probably not put, just because of what I was
Vegas
talking about. That I feel like is ranked just wildly out of reality.
That's
just
because
they
of the decay,
didn't play.
right?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's exactly it. Like with Vega, it's literally the same story over and over. That they just don't play enough to get them ranked like consistently in the top 30. So they always fall out. Then they go to the major and they actually look competitive. That's why they're so wildly off.
Sure.
But they're the only ones.
So Fnatic versus Vega, NRG versus Vici, Cloud9 versus Greyhound, NIP versus Tai Lu. We know that there's always that spoiler factor for the Ninjas of Pajamas. Obviously, last time we saw them, it was just an average performance. It wasn't anything crazy special. Ents versus Windstrike, Renegades versus Avantgarde, I think would be actually a really good game. I like the way that Avantgarde would be approaching it. Vitality versus Furia, and then G2 versus Spirit. So all in all, I think, if it was to use the HLTV.org rankings, you're right. The only one that stands out a bit like a sore thumb could be that Vega one. But other than that, like the matchups seem, especially if teams are ranking G's, Cloud9, Ninjas in Pajamas, etc., towards the top here, we shouldn't have too many blunders of matchups.
But you mentioned like teams practicing against each other that are playing in the same bracket, and stuff like that, and how you want to avoid them, and just I know you invited me, Chad, now for my little nuggets on this side of the Counter-Strike
Sure.
ecosystem, or however you want to put it. So I'm gonna give you a couple. First one, something that I consider like super, I don't know, unnecessary, I guess is the way to put it. You have teams who put 2 coaches on the server when you practice them, right? So, I mean, you could argue it could be any number of reasons. My opinion is they just have one guy who's an actual coach looking at the team and what they're doing, and you just have the other guy writing down what the other team is doing, right? So that next time you play that team, like you had NIP back in the day, open up like a whole book of, this is what these guys are doing and so on and so on, is for me that's like something that's pretty like BM. I think usually it's like the teams that do it are lower tier teams, so you don't really even care. They can have like 5 people in the server and you wouldn't be bothered because it's not really going to help them anyway. But with some of these like higher tier teams that have started to do it, it's just coming to a point where people are going to start like saying, well, if you want to have 2 people, like then you have to find someone else to practice with, because I know more and more players are getting annoyed by people trying to do that, because you don't want to think about, are these guys just trying to practice us to like steal the stuff, or what are we doing here? And the second thing is, you asked about like teams and teams compared to practice. A funny one for me was, to be honest, and I don't mean to offend anyone, but when I was in MIBR and we were playing NIP, like practice wasn't really that productive, like things weren't really like, I don't know, like they didn't seem that good. But then whenever we played them and when they started playing official games, they were playing really well. Like they played really good CS. Our series at the major against them was super close and super hard, something that we didn't expect coming into it. But after that, we've lost to them, I think, more than we won. So just tell you, with some of these teams, I don't know if it's that the players are maybe not serious enough about it or what they're doing, but sometimes it can be very deceiving, like the results that you have in practice. And out of these teams that we've mentioned, I think Cloud9 is going to be a very interesting one. Obviously, playing them 2 times at E-League, I think they played really good CS across the tournament, even in the game we won. I just think they need to figure out a little bit. I think they're much stronger playing from ahead than playing from behind. They're super hard to play against when they have momentum, and Automatic is playing super well as an opera. I think if he can keep up on the same level, I think he's going to be one of the better operas at the major, especially if they make it through the first phase.
Sergey, do you agree with those points about the coaching? About the players, picking the seeding? Do you think that there's that similar theme of not sandbagging? Maybe that's a bad term to use, but that maybe a bit of misdirection in practice. That teams are maybe not doing what they should be, or not practicing, or practicing tactically to give a different impression.
Well, in general, we was using this system before, right? But I think that it's kind of fine to use it for a regular tournament, but I don't think it's too good to use it for a major. On the other hand, you can use HLTV ranking as well, like Janko told, right? Because we have Vega, who is not playing like at all. And the third part, we was talking with you, I guess, Chad, during minor maybe, and I tried to figure out the situation. What if we would qualify, right, from seed number 24? How happy would be seed number 9, for example, of Fnatic to play us in first round if it would be by just seeding of the major,
Sure,
of the previous one, right? So it was also bad.
I mean, you know everything about tough seeding from the last major, so
yes, but
can't get any more rough than that.
I want to touch the topic which Janko mentioned about 2 coaches and stuff. We never played teams with 2 coaches. We never practiced against teams with 2 coaches unless it was some warm-up prac before EPL match or whatever during season, maybe some one map, It's basically from teams which can actually like try to beat you on the tournament. It was only HR and BIG who had 2 coaches.
Yeah.
Like we never was practicing against them serious before big events or whatever, right? So this coaching thing is, I totally agree with Janko, it's really bad, and I don't think it's just fair to some other teams. It's not because other teams can't have 2 coaches, it's just like sportsmanship,
I mean, it's basically the same thing as like you guys don't really have Go TVs on the server just because like obviously the team who owns the server can just like look back at it and basically anti-strat the shit out of you next time you meet each other. So
that's another next level thing. So obviously every team has opponents that they blacklist for practice for various reasons. So there are teams you blacklist because they do the thing where you give them the server IP, they join, and then they write on the server, hey, one guy can't join, can you try our server? Like it's the same location, blah, 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 blah. Then you join, then of course the first thing you do is you check status so you can see if there's GoTV on.
Yeah.
So then you see they have GoTV on their server, and that's why they wanted to change back, right? They're just like giving you an excuse, for example, so they could look up at stuff. So there's a team that's on your list here for the major that's blacklisted, at least in my book, for doing that. So
look, I mean,
even teams that are like, top 20, top 30 in the world think that they can get away with something like that, which is just it's ridiculous.
I think If anything, this is more of a technical issue. If we had some sort of an update where you could only have like GoTV observing one of the teams, just so you can basically set it up on your team, so you can see like what your players are doing only. I feel like that would help a little bit with like those teams, because might not necessarily be, they might not necessarily have to go TV just to counter you or just to watch you back, but just to watch themselves back, right? Just to see a better overview rather than just like 5 individual points of view. That's what I feel like is a bit of a problem that teams can't use at this point, unless you guys just use something else that I don't know about. But I feel like this is a bit of an issue from the technical side of CS:GO.
I mean, look, like really good coach and good player can just record 5 POVs or coach
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
POV, and they will realize it anyway just by the blind map. Even it doesn't matter. You don't need even whatever wall hack to understand what's up on the map, right? So it just depends on like how team is approaching it. Do they really doing it? Do they really taking it like so hard or not?
Yeah.
I mean, for me, it's simple, right? Like, I could as well, just being the one coach, I could just focus more on what the opponents are doing, right? And think about, oh, this round they did this, they threw these smokes and blah, 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 and write that stuff down and focus on that. But then I cannot focus as much on what my own team is doing. So I think if you want to deal with that stuff, then just have one guy decide what he's going to focus on, right? And what's the next step? Let's have 5 guys in, and everyone's going to watch. This guy's going to watch which smokes they're throwing, and it could evolve into whatever, right? So I just think it's something that just stupid, really, and shouldn't be happening.
Yeah, but on the other hand, about teams spracking each other, I just want to mention this because Vega last 2 majors never played against teams and never surged the practice against team who is playing the major. So
wait, you're saying that they don't play teams who are going to be at the major?
No.
That just goes even more with their playstyle, right? The fact that they're so hard to read is they're not
exactly.
Okay, Jesus Christ.
They're preparing and they never play in the teams because it's major.
Well, something's changed because we're pracking them tomorrow. I booked like 6 maps
but
in
you're
3
in
days,
different
so
stage. You're in different stage. They're not
you
pracking
mean
their
that
stage.
it's not in the same stage? Yeah, I get it.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Well, Lucas, can we bring back up the graphic? Let's see if we can get Sergey's list and how he might change it. Obviously, we had Janko's, we had the HLTV.org one. Oh, look, we've even got this.
Oh,
okay,
shit.
Cool.
This is like 10 out of 10 production.
Yeah, we've given him time. He's worked it out. So, Sergey, with the list on the screen, how would you can do it like Janko did. You could do it in pools. You could do it in groups of 6 or 7 or however you want to do it.
Basically, the first pool is kind of same, but we just need to swap Cloud9 and Energy. I think that Cloud9 will be better. Swap Cloud9 Energy.
Cloud9 and Energy.
Cloud9 to second, Energy to third.
Cloud9 to second.
Yep.
Yeah. Then swap Vitality and Ence as well.
All right, Lucas, let me talk you through this. Cloud9, number 2.
He's totally
Cloud9, number 2. Okay. C9, number 2. Yeah. NRG, number 3. Yeah, so move Ninja. Yeah, there you go. What was that one? Vitality and who are we swapping?
Ence.
Ence. Okay, so move Vitality up 1, Ence down 1. This is like The Price is Right. I feel like would you leave Renegades there?
Most people don't even know.
No, I would put Vitality on 5.
Okay. Move Vitality up 1 more and Renegades down to below Ence. So move Renegades down. Red 1, the guy with the bandana. There you go. All right. What do we got next?
We have Avantgarde.
You put them above Renegades or?
No, right after.
Okay. Avantgarde under Renegades. Move them up. There you go. Now it gets messy. Now it gets a little bit. This is the thing with these teams, right? Like, from watching Vici and Greyhound like in person.
Yeah, they're gonna be at the bottom. Those two, I feel like, have to be.
And just put Vega as well somewhere closer to G2. And everything else you can keep the same.
The bottom's just a clusterfuck. So. Yeah. Obviously, you
just Vega to Spirit. You cannot move it. You can keep it. Yeah, something like that. Vega and Spirit. It doesn't matter. Yeah.
Do you think Vega's approach is like they do that because it's with their playstyle, Sergey? About what you were saying, the fact that they don't practice teams in their pool, so they can actually just be really random and hard to read.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, that's the way of approaching things as well, right? I mean, for tier 1 team, it doesn't matter that much if you will play Vega. It doesn't matter if you will show something, right? Because you will even find out more info than them probably, right? And you know you're stronger and stuff, and it's like nothing special if you will prog them. But when they're not practicing against the same pool of teams who are at kind of their level, that's pretty hard for opponent then, because every opponent, like every team here in the list, played some officials this year or last 3 months at least. If you will open Vega, you will not see like anything there. And you have like zero idea of how they will play.
That's literally the same story every single major, like I said before.
Yeah.
Keep getting that sticker money, right?
Yeah, so that's a way of approach, and it's like nothing to judge, to be honest. That's the way they see the thing, so it's fine.
Look, they had 3 matches in something that's called a Hunt Wave League this year.
Yeah, but that doesn't
I don't know. I guess Vichy 3. Wait, Vichy? How did they play against Vichy? What is that?
Vichy was in Europe. I remember this.
Oh,
thing.
okay.
Vichy was bootcamping in Europe. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, they played Vichy 3D Max and Super Jimmy, so that's about the extent of information you have on Vega Squadron at this point.
All right, so I think we can put a bow on this topic here about the major seeding because everything looks like it's going to be pretty similar, right? I think we can see who the clear, top 4 to 5 teams are. Well, top 6 is pretty clear from there, and then the bottom we can just realize it's becoming a bit of a mess. So before we move on to talking about the tournament, which just popped up out of nowhere, I want people in chat to start pumping some questions through now. It can be for Janko, Striker, Sergey, myself. It doesn't really matter. It can be in general. I want to, before we move on to the Ice Challenge one, I want to bring up this topic and get both of your opinions on this. This is another thing we discussed at length, and it is going to be the org meta right now. Now, just to preface this, I'll give you where we kind of landed on it and where we ended up. I think the discussion roundabout, we got to the point that this is Valve crowbarring this into the game because they want players to use it to see, its actual benefits. That there are clear benefits. One of the thoughts that I had having a chance to play with it a little bit is that it allows you to hold more advantageous angles as a CT, not necessarily needing to use the utility in the same way. And I think that they won't adjust the price of it until after the major, and they should just put it back to what it originally was because I think people would probably still buy it. So what is your guys' take on this in the current meta? Do you think it's good? Do you think it's bad? What do you foresee going forward?
Well, I think the gun is not necessarily overpowered. I think just as you said, like the price makes it overpowered, right? For what it can do, I think it's too cheap. And I think the point is as well with what people say about, well, the gun didn't really change, just the price changed. Why wasn't if it was so OP, why was no one playing with it before? Well, I think Elige made a really good comment in regards to that, saying, well, why would I spend my time so much on a gun, like practicing a gun that I'm only going to use in these certain situations when I have like 6K or 6.5K, so only in like full buy rounds I can use this gun. Why would I spend that money spending time practicing that gun instead of the M4 or the AK or whatever? Now that the gun is viable, I can buy it. I can buy it as much as I buy the AK or as much as I buy the M4. It makes more sense for me to practice it and get better with it, and then the gun really seems like overpowered in some situations. So I agree. I think the fix is fairly simple in terms of just having the price go up, but you could argue, should it be how much should you raise it back to its old level or somewhere in between? But I think it definitely needs to be more expensive than it is right now. There needs to be a price to pay for. If you want this gun, then you can't have all your nades, so that leaves you exposed to something else, and you can be stronger, in a straight up duel or something along those lines.
Sergey?
Yeah, I don't think it's like super weird that people playing with it now, because a lot of people were crying before, and as Janko told and what Elige mentioned, I had totally same discussions with the players in mouse, because for example, like Mika told, okay, I had 9k hours with M4 AK, what I have to do now, like practice OG or not to practice OG, right? But if it's in the current meta, obviously you should. On the other hand, if it will be more expensive, like what we are seeing now, that teams are just buying third round on Mirage 5 Augs, coming 3 guys in windows with an Augs and just spraying it, and you can't do nothing, right? And what if you have this 4K and you can't buy Aug and Kevlar? Like how it would change the meta again, right? People would have to do one more eco, or will have to play M4s, and it will be just more balanced a bit. That will have more options economy-wise and more decisions on a second round already. Because right now, even Oprol and BIG, like Thompson can just take this AUG, and they will not need OP, you know?
That was ridiculous. We had a round against them on cash, like the first, second gun round. Guardian is like searching A main with the op and clearing angle by angle, and Tabson is holding an off angle, which was a good position, like towards car. But still, like he sprays him down so fast with the AUG from like almost car to A main that a player like Guardian doesn't have enough time to really like take his shot. I don't know if he missed it because he had to like move to federal. I don't know, but he lost the duel with an op, dry duel to an AUG. So the gun has its definitely pros. It has some cons as well. It's not good in all situations, but I think for sure like the price on it needs to go up. And I agree with what Sergey said. Some players are just reluctant to play with it. They just say, "Oh, this is a noob gun. I'm not going to be using this gun. This gun is for noobs." And I'm like,
one of your players?
of course, in both teams, there were players who had that mindset. Luckily, there's players who are mentally sound and they understand that the gun is strong and it has its uses, especially in some of the positions that they play. And it's like, if it's in the game, listen, I have Tech 9 Meister in my team. That guy's going to use anything. So,
Yeah, that's true.
No, jokes aside, I really think you're foolish if you don't use it. If it fits your position and if you can practice it, for these players, they're so skilled. You don't need to practice 1,000 hours with the AUG to be good with it. You just need to get used to the recoil kinda and use it situationally when you want to go for certain plays. Of course, for the majority of the time, probably you're going to play with your default guns. I think the Krieg is much harder than the AUG to control and to master, but I think that's why it can be even more annoying with the AUG than the AUG when a guy is really good with the Krieg. So
I had one guy
like Chris J, like Elige obviously on Liquid, right? You can see how annoying those guys are in some positions because they're really good with the gun. It just gives them an advantage in some of the fights in the positions that they play. Not to mention that it actually is psychological warfare. When a guy dies 3 times in a row, like getting one-tapped from a Krieg, he's gonna lose his mind. I don't know really what the cause for those reactions, but with some guys it is like that. Instead of just accepting it, it's in the game. You can use it or not use it, but don't whine about it.
It's the same. I was actually comparing this to the auto sniper back in the day, basically, towards the start of CS:GO, and even like at the end of 1.6. Like whenever somebody picked up an auto sniper, people called it the auto noob, and a lot of people did. Like that was a big.
More people should use the auto sniper. It's just 250 more than the
op,
and you get more
like,
per kill. Like it's different because it's not one shot, one kill. But some maps playing off angles with the AUG, where with the auto sniper, where people can't spend as much utility to like get map control, it would be really strong. But I'm gonna take it one step at a time. I can't come into a team. You all are gonna play double scar, double op, one shotgun. We can't kick off with that. That's like after a couple of years of solid marriage, you suggest something a bit kinky like that.
So, just before we put a bow on the AUG situation, do you both think that if they revert it after this little experiment, if they revert the price point of these weapons back to its original or make it more expensive, do you think there'll still be a use case and players will still be using it going forward? Obviously not as much, but there'll be more of a balance. Like when there is the full buy possible, then they can go to the AUG as the next step before who knows what.
Yeah, I think so. I just don't want to see 5 AUGs in first gun round with light Kevlars. That's what I don't want to see, because nowadays, even like second op roll is definitely not there because of this AUG. You don't need to buy second op, you can just buy AUG on multiple positions where you're normally using second op. So if price will be a bit lowered, a bit higher, and you can like afford to buy this gun in a full gun round if you really need this gun in some positions, and I can call like nuke secret or whatever because it's better than op there or something like this, you know. If you really want and need to use this gun, yeah, you can buy it in a full gun round, but you can't afford it to buy in third round of the game and instantly get like everything when you lost a pistol round. That's not Gucci.
Yeah, I agree. I think it remains as it is now, especially after players have been, playing with it at least a little bit. I think we're going to see it, if you're winning like 4 or 5-0 and you have 6, 7, 8K and the difference is 500 or 600 or however between M4 and AUG, I think why not? Some people might buy it if it fits. Again, I think it has its place as a situational gun that in some position it can be really good, but it has to be more expensive. And I think in that case you'll see people buy it. Of course, M4 is still going to be the dominant gun on the CT side, but you can see it sometimes being picked up. The only way it doesn't get picked up is if players think like, oh, I'm gonna play like the Elige argument, right? Like I'm gonna use it very rarely. It's not worth my time to get good with the gun, so it's better to just keep playing with the M4 and get better with the M4. Maybe that draws like players a bit more away from it.
I definitely see that coming. And also, I'm not entirely sure that the gun is considered OP enough at this point for people not to just go back to the M4 purely because of economic purposes. Because it feels like, especially with how the economy works, that you have like basically you would have to change how you eco and how you like half buy and stuff like that quite a bit if the price of the AUG went up like 300 back to where it was. So just because of that, I feel like people would just rather go back to the M4 rather than change like how the entire team or how certain players do their force buys or health buys and change like the first 3 rounds entirely on the basis of that. I just think making it more pricey would just, sure, some players would probably keep using them at certain in certain situations, but I feel like we just go down to like below like whatever 2% of all kills at tournaments where it's basically irrelevant.
Alright, so hopefully we can strike the balance because we all know that Volvo are trying to make things as interesting as possible for all of us. But
wait, how much was it? It was 3,500?
33? I want to say 34, 33 or 34. I'm not.
I think it was 33.50. The thing was, I thought it was 3,500 as well. When we first had this conversation, I was under the impression that it was 3,500, right? Because that's what it was in 1.6.
Yeah,
and I
no,
never
that's not true.
never remember buying it at all. People are saying 3,300. I don't know where I got the 50 from. But regardless, so that's only a $150 different price point, right? Which is from where it is now, which is basically fuck all. So I think if they put it back to where it was, everything will just, I don't think we'll go back to normality, but I think, as we mentioned, the use cases will be there.
Yeah, I think, I thought it was more as well, but I still think even if it's
I'm trying to find it, but I can't.
Yeah, I'm Googling it as well, but can't really
The
find
thing is,
it.
I've checked this like about 10 times now, but I've forgotten like every single time. Wait, I know. I had it in my old article about meta changes when the UMP was OP. I actually had it in there.
Oh shit, we're really rolling back the years.
August 3300, yeah. And
Yeah, so
M4s are obviously 31.
yeah, so it's not like it's 150, but the thing is what Sergey said, right? If you buy it in the third round, if you don't get a kill, it's like 4,400 you have by that point if you don't have any frags and you just went for the full eco. So I think that 150 is the difference between you being able to buy like a smoke and a flash and deciding, do I either just want to get one smoke or just get 2 flashes, and also do you buy head armor or not? Because if you're buying in the third round, as we mentioned, the opponents have Mac 10s, they have some shittier guns, so, at that point, if you don't have a head armor, you can still get wrecked by those guns too. So it's a bigger trade-off than people can imagine, than people may think, because if you get 1 kill, you can buy a head armor and a smoke and a flash, which is, for a round like that, if you decided to buy, it's like luxury to have that amount of gear, really.
Sure. All right. Let's put a bow on this one, and we're going to move forward to the Ice Challenge, which is an interesting name for a tournament, but it's at an expo, I believe, in London. So this is going to be the last showing on LAN before anybody plays. I guess, the major. So we have a 4-team tournament, another one of these bad boys. It's a great way for teams to be putting their toe in the water, which is starting tomorrow at 11:30 CET. And the teams are Na'Vi, Avantgarde, North, and Heroic. So you've got 2 teams from the CIS region and 2 Danish squads, and the opening matchups are Na'Vi versus Heroic and Avantgarde versus North. Now, the only teams with anything to play for, I would say, or anything to lose, I guess, is Na'Vi and Avantgarde, and that's potentially losing confidence going into the major. Hopefully, they set their expectations and they're testing themselves in this environment. But it's best of 3s the whole way through. So it's a good way to iron out any kinks and make sure everything's good for the LAN environment for Na'Vi. We get to see if they're still arguing with each other all the time. For Heroic and North, we both know that they're in positions within that scene where things could end up a mess regardless. Roster swaps could be on the cards, as we just saw North had a coaching change, which you talked about earlier, and Heroic just brought in Blame F. Avantgarde did impress me at the minors, and they continue to do so. They have a bit more of, I guess, a unique take. They basically doing the standard stuff, but they'll throw in a little kink here, there, and everywhere. I think James is a pretty impressive AWPer. So let's start with expectations. Strike, are you gonna give us the classic Na'Vi have to win this one?
Of course, but I mean it's the same case as, well, I'm trying to remember. I can't remember what the other tournament was when we were talking about it, but it's the same thing with like a heavy favorite at attending the tournament. This is not a tournament that they can not come first and gain anything from it. So unless they have to win it, because if they don't, it's going to be a big shit show for them and a bad blow before the major.
It feels like a pretty open and shut case, which is unfortunate here. But I think one of the more interesting signs for me is, are Na'Vi going to show any change in their map pool, right? I think every team going up against going into this major are looking at Astralis as the top dog, and I don't know with the time that they've taken off if they've looked to readdress anything, if they look to make cache map that they might actually be interested in playing on a more regular basis. We've seen them flirt with that in the veto before against Astralis. Janko or Sergey, do you guys have any thoughts about this tournament or Na'Vi in particular?
I think it's a great tournament to showcase that teams being at a tournament simply because they have to, and they would never attend this tournament if they didn't have to because of sponsor obligations. So it's a super silly situation especially for Na'Vi and Avantgarde, because they have stake at the major. So how do you do this tournament if you're in their seat? Do you say, let's go to this tournament and not care, just run around and play stupid stuff, not show a single thing we're going to do? Let's change our positions as well. But then you're just wasting time for the 5 days that you're traveling back and forth and playing at the actual tournament instead of being home and practicing or boot camping before the major, right? The other thing you can do, well, let's test out some of the basic stuff that we have to see how that goes. Some of the really cool stuff that we have in store, we're not going to show it no matter what, because we don't care whether we win or lose a tournament that has 50K prize pool a week before the major. But then you get into a position where no one likes to lose. Like, no matter what you're playing, no one likes losing, especially to some of the teams that are here. I don't think Na'Vi considers them their equals. So you're going to be in a situation where maybe you're losing to some of these teams, and you're going to say, yeah, let's do this or let's do that, and then God forbid that doesn't work. Then you're in a position where, well, does this stuff that we really thought is good, does it even work? Then you struggle with your confidence, right? So I think it's going to be very hard for them to get a lot of anything positive out of this tournament. Obviously, going all the way and winning it, like, it's always great to win and lift a trophy, no matter how small the tournament is, or how even if the opponents are not the strongest or the best. But what is the cost for that for Na'Vi? What if they've decided to change some positions maybe on maps, and now people are going to see it? I think one of the main strengths is going to make MIBR one of the big problems at the major, probably not just because they have great players, but no one will know anything. You don't know what their map pool is going to look like. Like, yeah, you can tell probably their Inferno is going to be good, and even if they play Nuke, it's not going to be great, and things like that. But you don't know, is their cache better than their overpass? They can go through the first phase without playing a single map, without playing cache once, and then you can pick it against them in the playoffs because they left it in. But what do? Is it a strong map? You just don't have the information. So I guess the point of this is you don't really want to give information about your team unless you really feel like you have to attend a tournament or you want to test something in a live environment. But this doesn't really seem like that situation. So I think a team like Navi and even a team like, Avangard is a bit of a different position because they could use like some, a good game against a team like Heroic or North or even Navi on LAN is going to mean a lot for them coming into the major. But it's also an awkward situation, right? Like you don't want to let people know too much about you coming into the biggest tournament of the year.
Well, I have a bit different thoughts. Like, I don't know what's up with Norse and Heroic. But first, I will cast this tournament, so I'll try another role as a caster.
Oh,
nice.
you're doing the opposite role than me, bro.
Yeah, but for Navi, it's like a warm-up tournament. Like FaZe played warm-up tournament, Astralis played warm-up tournament, right? To find out like what's up, because you, Janko, know as well, pracs are pracs, right? But official match, even if it's shit, like low tournament official match is definitely better in any case. And on the other hand, as I know, at least that might be not true, but Navi is just bootcamping there, so they don't need to travel back and waste time. And that's like what making the changes, right?
Helps.
So that's the first part. So they're just playing like a warm-up tournament, maybe without showing anything. And then they still have a lot of time to practice. With Avangard, these guys, like for these guys, every tournament is like a gold, right? They're trying to play really good on every tournament they attend. And for them, it's another chance to just like win a tournament and win some money, obviously. So I think they will also play pretty serious because they was playing minor obviously already and stuff like that.
Well, also, I'm sorry, but for a team like
Yeah.
Avangard, something that probably you and me don't think about is like for them also having a good result means they move up in the ranking, right? That's a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of these teams are thinking about that because it affects his invites and stuff like that.
Yeah, obviously. It's not like we was not thinking about it for ages, right? But for them, it's really important thing because why Vega is not playing anywhere. They can't pass online qualifiers because of their how it's called, because of their basically living places, right? They have
Location,
like big locations, right? Big latencies and stuff, some of them. And then they don't have rankings, and then they don't have any invites and playing only majors, which is ridiculous. But that's what we have. With Norse, also just changed the coach. Basically, I guess for them it's just a mid-tournament, like mid-up tournament with a new coach or whatever. And Heroic, well, I don't know what's up there, to be honest.
I mean, for them, it's kind of a testing ground as well because of Blame F. Because as far as I know, they haven't really played anything serious. I mean, not overly serious since they got him in. So that would be a pretty big test for them as well.
Yeah, but I agree. This tournament can be really interesting, actually, when you look at it, right? Is Navi going to win without having to show too much? Heroic has been practicing, they got a new player, they need to show something here, what they've been working on, because they're not going to be at the major. Avangard is going to be there, so, for them to get some things rolling, to get some confidence coming into it. And for North, you think the team is just waiting to make more changes after the major, but how many times have we seen a team that's just supposed to fall apart, they come to a tournament, and because they don't care and there's no pressure, they just, roll over everyone. So it can be very entertaining tournament to watch, that's for sure.
Yeah, I know some team like this.
Well, I think the thing, for those people who aren't aware, I think that this tournament is a sponsor obligation for some of these teams.
Yeah.
So is it for everybody, basically?
I went to see if Heroic was sponsored by them.
I'm not sure about Heroic.
Yeah, the other three for sure. So the fact of the matter here is, for North, this could just be compounding on the problem, right? They probably I gotta tell you from first-hand experience, and obviously this cuts deep for Sergey in recent times, but not qualifying for a tournament or not qualifying for a major when you probably should have is the worst feeling in the world. Even after you lose a tournament, the last thing you want to do is go home and turn on your PC and play again, right? So I think for them, the fact that they have to go into this tournament, I would treat it in the fashion that Janko was alluding to in the NIP at the Dubai event, kind of fashion where just throw caution to the wind, obviously play with your loose structure, but just try and have some fucking fun, because you've really got nothing to lose and everything to gain. If you can put that win on the board, you're going to help yourself from at least an emotional level, and maybe you'll enjoy Counter-Strike a little bit more, which obviously isn't the fact of the matter anymore, because this is a professional environment now. But any win can be a really big win for them. So, if you lose, you go out in last place, whatever. If you put up a decent fight, if you test Na'Vi, if you make Avant-Garde, to go all 3 maps, I think anything for them is a positive. For Heroic, I don't know. They just seem like they're going to be the team who is going to continue to have anybody who appears to be a star just poached, right? It doesn't feel like if you're a player on the way up, Heroic's just a stepping stone for the next big thing. It's not going to be a place that a lot of these stars stay in for very long. So, all in all, I think that the best thing about this tournament is getting to gauge Na'Vi before they actually have to play, or at least from an analytical perspective, right? Because I want to see if they've changed things up, and all those caveats are in there. What kind of approach are they going to take with this? I think they want the W. These are a team who gets super fiery at one another. They obviously get stuck into each other in the middle of games, and I guess that is that just a CIS way of operating, Sergey? Getting so fired up at each other?
Well, not always, but I mean, if you will look at Avant-Garde and then at Na'Vi, you will see like
Big
fire
difference.
and dice, right? So Avant-Garde is like chilled and stuff, and then you see Na'Vi. So it depends always on personalities.
So I'm just trying to think. Do we have much else to touch on this topic of dice? It's a pretty small one, right? We don't really have too much to go off here. We know North is in a bit of a bad place. Na'Vi looking to get the year started. Avant-Garde, they're sitting pretty right now. They got the major next week, and then Heroic, who are just one of those middle tier teams who seem to struggle but hang around that
Heroic
position.
potentially have probably the biggest stake in this, just because they don't really have anything else to attend, just in general.
So it's like the Super Bowl theory that Tommy keeps throwing around, that this is their Super Bowl, right?
I mean, something along those lines, yeah. Just as a caveat to the tournament, that they, as a team, that's probably the lowest ranked out of these 4. I'm pretty sure. Must be, right? Yeah, 37 for sure. They actually have the biggest stake in this. That's kind of an interesting angle to the tournament in general. They could just and as far as I know, I saw Spryberg tweeting something about a boot camp as well. That they were pretty happy with it and stuff like that. So they clearly prepared for it quite well as well, if they had a boot camp. So I feel like they could potentially be like a dark horse with that.
Sure. All right. Well, I feel that the ice challenge is slowly melting away here, and that's the end of our designated topics for this evening. But I did take note of a couple of the questions that came through chat. You guys can shoot some more through right now if we can pick them up quick enough. But we'll start off some of these. The first one I've got is, I didn't pick up the names of who asked these questions, so I apologize. But one of the questions was directed at you, Janko. It says, how are the comms with you and Nico? Because it looks like you communicate a lot, which makes sense. He's the in-game leader and you're the coach. But I'm going to take this one step further. Are you guys communicating in English or Serbian when you're having those little moments of, shit, we need to change this, or, this is the solution?
You mean in game, like in an official game, or in? No, in an official game, I think all the time I speak in English because I want the other players to know what I'm saying as well. Only if I feel like I don't have enough time to say everything, and I think it's really important that it goes through, then maybe I will say it in Serbian, or just something, as an end note, like when I've said everything I need to say team-wise, but I want to get him a bit to play with a bit more energy or something. I say something like, the last 3 words in Serbian or something like that. But most of the time, yeah, it's for sure in English. I had this in MIBR. I try to keep it the same in phase, that whenever it's a team environment, English is always the language that's being spoken, because now you have Rain and Olaf, they both speak Swedish. Guardian and Adren can speak Russian, and me and Nico can speak Serbian, so you don't really want to have these 3 little groups, right? You want it to be a team, so we stick to English as much as humanly possible.
Sure. All right. This is one for everybody. This is a fun one. When a roster change takes place, what is the procedure? I.e., do the remaining players sit down and agree on potential candidates, or does the org come back with a list of potential players? and then they choose from that list. Well, my last experience with that was replacing myself, was stepping down. But before that, it was replacing.
a hard one.
Yeah, it was a hard one. Was replacing Havoc with. Who did we replace him with? We replaced Havoc with. How's my memory going on this?
Yam?
Oh, you still
Yam?
No,
Oh,
we already
you're
had
still-
Yam.
okay.
And that's a fun story. So basically, because we used to live in the casino in Las Vegas back in that time, you couldn't really escape each other, right? Like, to do fun stuff doesn't exist in wintertime in a casino in Las Vegas. So for us, it basically was me sitting on the floor of my manager's hotel room, racking our brains out on the way that we were going to do this, because we had to tell a guy that he was, first of all, getting kicked from the team, which means he loses his salary and all that kind of fun stuff. Has to fly all the way back to Australia, and he's out. Like, that's it, right? So the experience in that situation was I sat there with I think it was me, JKS and Azza, and then the manager Gomez, and we were sitting there for the longest period of time of how we were going to do this, how we were going to make the change, who was going to tell him and all this stuff. And basically, I sat down with Luke in the lobby, and I told him that. So that was kind of the last time I ever had to be involved in one of those situations. So, okay, what we could do is we can flick this one to you. When you guys did the change with snacks, I don't know if you can talk too much about this, but where did that come from? Like, did you have a big say in this? Was this more from the players?
Well,
Because of buyouts and stuff, what's to go with
I
management?
honestly don't want to touch this topic. We can touch
Sure.
topic when we was bringing Martin and Sunny.
Sure.
That was the last time where it was like normal way of change. So basically we lost the major like always, and people start thinking about the changes. But that was like the way how I kind of see it a normal way. First, one player was removed immediately after match, basically, and I never was a person who was hiding something or whatever. I just told it to him right after match outside that you guy didn't done everything you promised to myself and to yourself. So you basically didn't done your 100%, right? And you know like how it will go now, right? So Lowell was removed this way, he understood it, and I'm really happy how it ended up, like how the relations went up after, because he understood his fault, and that was nothing special. With Dennis, it was a bit different because the guy was doing his 100% actually, and doing his 110%, I would say even. But then we wanted Stiko for quite a while before, and we just couldn't buy him out from HR because price was too high for him. And Sunny was almost for free, basically. But lineup was formed by suggestion of a players together with owner and including me, and everyone like accepted both of those candidates. Yeah, because we already talked through like the roles they potentially can have, and do they fit us at least like on all the maps, and how they are as a persons. Because I didn't know Sunny at all except saying hi. I knew Stiko obviously, and yeah, in the end we just like created this team, this lineup, which was playing pretty well, I would say, including everyone in the club, right? Not just some party. So that was like a good part for me, at least. With Snugs, I will not touch on this, but that was different. I will just say it was totally different. Also, I like the way Robs was picked to the team. So Robs was picked was the longest test I ever saw in my like coach career. He played over 30 maps in the team with a team to see if he actually fits, right? So 30 maps is not like the short test when you have short period of time. And then we just signed him, and the guy was impressing like from start to finish. And I think that every team who is picking player have to make a test, to be honest. You can't pick like a cat, you know.
Sure.
I was about to actually touch on this based on what you said last about like actually putting him through a very comprehensive test. I feel like nowadays, just because of the time constraints that we have in CS, it's causing teams to just pick to rush into changes when they want to chip. It's not really their fault. It's just the way that Counter-Strike works, and that they can't just take a month off and come up with a new player to pick. but it's just like a topic of conversation, I guess, in how much teams cannot even like properly test their players and think about what kind of a player they can get in the current landscape.
Sure, things are obviously a lot stricter now, and we can turn this to Janko because we had this kind of discussion, or this was a point I brought up when we were talking about FaZe on one of the other podcasts, was whether or not this you obviously don't need to allude to at all, Janko, but it's about Adren being on the team, and obviously you had to pick up a player in a period of time where roster locks coming in, the majors happening. There's not a huge amount of time to sort all that information out, and he was one of the better available candidates. I was considering for a team like yours, who has, as you've mentioned, 4 fantastic players who can basically do whatever you need them to do, right? Nico and Olaf can secondary AWP whenever you want. Guardian's very versatile as an AWP. Rain's just a very solid player from an individual standpoint. Having that core of the team constantly there, does that make it like easier to bring in a guy like a Dren? Obviously, there's people who have their positions and move. That's never going to be easy. But do you think that it could be a consideration where you keep a Dren? This is completely hypothetical. You keep a player for like 3 months, and then like after 3 months is up, you just move on to somebody else, and that way you could keep like a fresh look. Or do you think it's better to stick with 5 and try and build something like an Astralis type project or something with a bit more longevity?
Oh, you mean like change the 5th guy every 3 months?
Well, like the option for that, right? Because Adren right now, and I'm talking out of my ass here, this is just my complete opinion, is he feels like a temporary fix until after the major happens, where there might be more players who have, who fit whatever you want better coming out of the woodwork. That kind of stuff is changing all the time.
Well, just to clarify, yes, he is on like a contract until the end of the major, as far as I know, but that's not, if something ain't broke, we're not going to try and fix it. If we come to the major, and not necessarily result-wise, but as a team, if we like start playing really well, and if Nico can in-game lead and still play on a high level, and if his calls are solid enough, like sure, I mean, I would think it would be better to have an in-game leader and let him do something else. But if he is capable of doing both, then it's like, why would we force an extra change when this seems to be working out, So that's not out of the question that Adren remains on the team, right? Even after the major, but I don't think it's something that's really viable to have for the long term, like to have those changes keep happening, because, well, it could work in theory if it was always the same type of a player, like if no one else would need to make almost any adjustments, and it would just be this one guy, let's say, for example, an AWPer who plays all the same spots, right? So then he would just play his spots, and the rest of the team would, play the same stuff. And that way we wouldn't want to change. We wouldn't have to change too much. Let's say, you compare it to basketball, and you just keep changing like the center, right? Like every 3 or 4 months you get a different center in, but the other guys are still playing, their own positions, point guard, shooting guard, and all that stuff, so they can still play their own game, and it's again the same type of a center, right? So that way it could work, but that feels like it's super specific, that it would be something that you could find. So I really think you, as any team, you're just looking to find like the 5 guys that are first very skilled, that have a good work ethic, and that also mesh well in terms of personalities and roles on the team. I think that's what you want to establish, and run with the same 5 for as long as humanly possible.
Do you agree with that, Sergey? Just get 5, or do you think there's like room in Counter-Strike to be a bit more flexible with the players?
No, kept 5.
Kept 5?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
All right, well, let me see if I wrote down any other questions we're coming in through here. We've almost hit 10 o'clock, so we've almost nailed it. Everything else is pretty much the same. It's either stuff we covered or stuff that you guys aren't going to answer anyway.
Oh, is that a challenge chat?
Well, like, for example, what do you guys think about Chris J and FaZe? Would it be good or bad? Like, what are we even meant to say about that?
That's...
I don't know. Like, I don't know him personally, like as an in-game leader, but he and from like playing against Mouse and like watching them play even before and now, like from both of my roles, it doesn't seem like he's the kind of a Carrigan or Glaive or Fallen, right? It doesn't seem to me that he's that type of a in-game leader. He's more of a guy who kind of makes do with what he's got, and people give input. And I would assume that Sergey was like playing a big part in helping, game plan and, organizing some stuff. So I wouldn't think like, this team has enough players who can frag. You want someone who can like just allow it for them only to frag, right? You want an in-game leader who doesn't need really help from anyone. Of course, he would get it. Someone like Nico is an ideal secondary caller, but you need the guy who's gonna like that's gonna be his main strength, and that's why you have him on the team. Of course, having someone like Christian, you get a guy who can frag extremely well, secondary opper, great with pistols, and a lot of other qualities. But just as a pure in-game leader, he wouldn't be a guy you look at, right? Unless you're really kind of desperate. And I'm not saying that because he's bad. I'm just saying because it's not his natural position, right? So you're going and guys aren't available, then you're like, we just need someone. No, none of our guys can do it, and then you reach out to him. But I'm just talking with no direct experience. We have a guy here who can testify to it.
Yeah, but honestly,
if
Chris was a captain, more of a captain, right? He had the last word normally with our team because we naturally didn't have in-game leader, right? We created different structure, and that's called a team mind. So we didn't have a single guy who was responsible for everything, and everyone was able to always give idea, but at the same time it wasn't chaotic, right? If someone had a really good like thoughts on what should happen right now, then Chris could agree or not to agree on it. He had like a last word, right? He was calling majority of the time, but every guy in the team was giving the tip of his position. For example, like if Chris gave a call and some guy could tell like that will not work from his position on the map in the middle of the site, because that will just not work. They're like countering it automatically, right? And he could propose something better or even adjust this call so it will work on the fly. So that was like our approach because we didn't have a choice, but Chris grew pretty well as well during these 2 years from zero. Like it's not that easy even from zero to call in a strong team, right? With strong players. Sure. So I think he made a really good job anyway, and he still have a lot of time and a lot of like parts of the game to progress with if he wants to be an in-game leader in future, but maybe he will search also for a team where he will not need to, I don't know.
And I think it's really interesting what you just said. I'm just going to touch on it briefly for the viewers. I think people maybe have this impression that, the in-game leader, he's the mastermind, he's the puppet master, he's telling everyone what to do and, up to the detail, and they just execute what he's saying. Like, Counter-Strike has evolved past that. For you to be a tier 1 team, like what Sergey described, that's what needs to happen. Like, you need to have players who are on their side of the map recognize, what's going on. If you have a guy who's playing Banana on T side on Inferno, he needs to say, hey, these guys are saving nades. Like, we don't bait out nades going late, like it's gonna be hard to go B, right? So the in-game leader knows, okay, if I want to go B late, it has to be just with a flash. I can't announce myself coming. They're gonna throw down the Molotovs and the smokes and so on. So everyone needs to be contributing in that sense, and that's where you have some really valuable players who may not light up the scoreboard, but they can be really good in organizing communication. Of course, it's never gonna keep your place on a team if you can't frag well enough, but it helps like the team if a guy is giving good information and it helps you make the right call.
All right.
Yeah, I agree. Correct.
Well, I feel that that's a pretty good note to end this one. Thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in. Does anybody, I'm going to leave this open forum, does anybody have anything that they would like to say before we shut this one down?
I'd just like to say thank you, Chad SPUNJ Burchill, for giving me this opportunity to make some more money for you. I've been enjoying it thoroughly in the past, and I had a little bit of a break from it, so I really missed it to an extent, so I hope you spend it well and not just on Ben & Jerry's ice cream.
I'll invite you to my place in Malta, Janko. You'll be one of the first guests. Don't you worry about it.
All right. That's what I want to hear.
Thank you, gentlemen, for great company and great topics. Really enjoyed the time with you.
All right. Striker, you wanna say anything?
We're available as a podcast.
Oh, yes. We are available as a podcast.
Anchor.fm/HLTV.
All right, sweet. Let's shut it down. Thank you once again, everybody. We'll see you next time. The next podcast will be on Sunday. I don't know the exact date, but that'll be the full major preview. We'll be checking it all out. Don't want to miss it. Maybe we'll even do extended. Who knows? We'll see you there. Peace.